Good morning and welcome to another LinkedIn Live, which is all in aid of supporting a forthcoming book that I am releasing later this month. It's called Planning for Success. I have now signed off all the proofs, all the artwork, all the audiobook files, so I am just waiting for the final date when I can release it on Amazon, so I will keep you tuned for that. And I wanted to take the opportunity to deep dive into some of the topics that appear in the book with the help of some friends. And one of the topics that appears quite early on in the chapter, I think it's in a logical order for helping you plan your social media, is all about focusing on goal setting, smart objectives. I'm a big fan of smart objectives, but actually even the stage before that, before you think about your business plan, before you start working out what you're going to do, is understanding your purpose and your why. And if we have met before, people will know I'm a big fan of Simon Sinek. I met him, he signed my book and I checked it and it was in May 2017. So it's quite a while, but I think it is one of those timeless classic TED Talks and books to read. Knowing why you get out of bed in the morning to do what you do, I think it's really important. His golden circle, talking not just about the what you do and how you do it, but the why as well. So this is the topic for today, and I'm excited to be joined by two friends, Sarah and Sam from Target PR in Cheltenham. We've worked together for over 5 years. I think it's probably longer than that as well. I get to come and spend time in your office with you and the team every month as well. So thank you both for agreeing to join me today. You did agree to join me.
We did. Thank you so much for asking us.
Would you like to do your own intros, Sarah?
Sure. Yes, I'm Sarah. I head up the team at Target PR. Sort of 30 years in PR and comms, and most of that has been agency side. So had the opportunity to work with all sorts of businesses, particularly around the business to business side of things, but I love that breadth. And now my role is very much about providing senior counsel to clients, but also being there to support the team so that they're delivering fantastic, purposeful communications to all our clients.
And I'm Sam Candiali. I'm a director at Target. I did a PR degree back way in the day, one of the first ones actually at Leeds, and then went on to work in local government before doing a stint as a journalist. And joined Target. It'll be 25 years next year. I've had a fantastic quarter of a century with the organisation. Work across all different sectors, but particularly enjoy the consumer side of the work. In partnership with Sarah, heading up the team.
Amazing. You have loads of lovely milestones and reasons to celebrate and party at Target. Sam, you recently did an MBA that was all about this topic, wasn't it? All about pillars of purpose. So could you share with us your MBA research?
Yeah, so I did a master's in leadership. It was in conjunction with the University of Gloucestershire and an organisation called Quolux, who some of you may have come across, their leadership development strategists. And as part of my research project in the final year, I decided to explore the link between PR and purpose. And purpose for me, just like you, Luan, I think of Mr. Sinek. I'm also a fan. I don't have a signed book though, sadly. And I've not met him either.
I should say, it was in a coffee shop before an event. I happened to be round the corner from where he was going to be and sat there and kind of went, he's over there. Go to coffee shops before events.
And it's a subject I think that particularly over the last 10 years or so has been debated widely, hasn't it? And I think, for us at Target, probably in that same sort of period, we started thinking about, well, how can we be a force for good? How can we help make the world a better place? And that sounds quite grandiose, doesn't it? But we all know that we can do small steps to be better businesses and to support the planet and to support people at the end of the day. So that was kind of our collective passion, and obviously wanted to look at how purpose links with PR, which is what we do and what I have been doing for half of my life. So So the research led to some results that enabled me to put together a model, which is called the Pillars of Purpose model, which I think you're going to share in the chat.
I am. I have the link ready.
I'm not going to go into loads of detail and bore everybody, but essentially we use it at Target as a framework for discussion to talk to organisations about how they can be purpose-led or become purpose-led, or they might already be on that journey, and it's, you know, considerations as they go there. And it kind of identifies some situational context around purpose, what some of the challenges might be or the opportunities. Then it moves on to what you need to do. So the output, so activities you need to do to kind of embed purpose within your organization. And then finally onto some outcomes, so the benefit. And there's lots of those, and we'll come on to talk about that, I'm sure, about being purpose-led. But the fundamentals underneath the model are the 3 pillars, hence the name. And they're kind of the bedrock, really, which organizations need to have in place in order to be purpose-led. And the 3 pillars are PR, probably no surprise, we're a PR agency, but that is fundamental. And PR, both from a tactical point of view, in terms of helping organizations define and articulate their purpose, but I think more importantly, from a strategic point of view. You know, we're not saying that organizations need to rush out and, you know, get PR people on board or recruit PR agencies, but organizations really need to think seriously about their reputation and how they're managing that and how they're protecting that. And, you know, PR can be really important at that level, at that strategic level, to offer that kind of counsel and guidance. It was really interesting, actually. One of the people that I interviewed for my research talked about PR as being an organization's conscience. And I really like that. You know, I think, you know, we are there to say, you know, are we being true to our purpose? Are we saying what we should be saying? Are we acting in a way that we should be? And, you know, us as PR people should be there to do that. So that was the first pillar. The second pillar is leadership, and it's kind of a bit of a, I guess, no-brainer, really. If you haven't got someone at the helm of the organization that buys into purpose and that wants to improve their business, you know, to be a better business, then, you know, it's going to make everything very, very challenging. And actually leadership runs throughout the model. You know, I think it's integral for purpose to be enabled. And the final pillar is communications. And I guess that's what we're here to talk about today. And really just highlighting the importance of communicating clearly and consistently, both inside your organization and outside your organization, to ensure that purpose is lived, breathed, and communicated at the end of the day. So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
I think there's a lot in there, isn't there, about inside, outside, conscience, you know, lots for everyone to consider. And I think we also kind of know that we should be doing this, but how easy or difficult is it to put this theory, this model, this knowing what we should be doing into practice?
I mean, it's not always that easy to pin it down, is it?
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the ways that having PR and comms experts around you can really help. So quite often we'll go into an organization and help them at a senior team level to unpack the why and to be able to articulate it. So it's not that the thought isn't there and the intent can be there, but actually, how do you crystallize it? How should we talk about it? Is sometimes quite difficult to pin it down. And so that's the role of comms advisors, is to help to draw that out. And I think also what's really interesting in part of Sam's research was when we think about that journey that organizations go on, that the situation you're in and the context around you impacts that. Of course it does. And if you're an organization that's new and you're, you know, starting from the ground up with a really clear sense of why you're going into business, what you want to achieve, what you want to achieve beyond profit, then actually you can start with this clean slate and really build that way of communicating your purpose, perhaps really clearly. But if you're a long-standing organization that changes over time, that can feel quite difficult to go, well, actually, how do I, as a business, set out what's important to us now and where we're going? Because every business changes over time, and, you know, we need to react to the world around us, and, you know, the increasing issues that are impacting every business, actually, in every sector, in terms of our environmental considerations, the well-being of the people that we employ and the people that we engage with, what matters to our customers. And I know, Sam, in your research, there were some great stats, weren't there, about, you know, just how much our audiences, as consumers or employees, how much they care about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, you know, we know that consumers are demanding it now. Consumers are actually increasingly looking to organizations, to businesses, to help make the world a better place rather than governments, for example. I think the Edelman Trust Barometer said, you know, 80% of people are looking to businesses to make the world a better place. We also know that, you know, people want to engage with purpose-led organizations. There was another study, the Zeno Group Purpose Study, that said 94% of people want to engage with purpose-led organizations. So there's that real demand there. And like you said, Sarah, people want to work for purpose-led organizations as well. And I think particularly now, I hate to say it, younger generations, Gen Z, Gen Z, you know, they're looking more and more to choose purpose over pay. There was a survey done by Monster, the job recruiter, a few years ago now, but they said 70% of Gen Zs would choose purpose over pay, which I think is pretty remarkable, isn't it, really?
Actually, anecdotally, we got an example of that really close to home, because Sam did a talk to the University of Gloucestershire students a year ago. In fact, there's another one coming up, isn't there, really soon, to talk to them about purpose and the role of purpose in comms. And one of the students in the room has since come to work for us. And actually hearing Sam talk about the fact that it mattered to us as an agency was something that really appealed to her. So you know, it's real, and it's really making a difference, I think, to organizations. But the process of how do we crystallize that into, you know, key messages? How do we think about what that means and how it should run through our communications internally and externally? You know, that takes a bit of working through, and that's where, you know, the honing, the distilling, the clarification is really important. Because if we don't have a really clear way of articulating it, then how can we expect people to follow it?
Yeah, and I think there's a theme here, isn't there, in other sessions I've done, and the conversations we have is actually, you know, what you've just been saying, Sam, is like understanding the research that's out there and the trends that are out there, and what's going on between the difference between what we actually see for ourselves as well is important to combine those. And actually the point on what younger generations want when they come into the workplace, and if they find that, then actually that's going to help deliver those messages out to clients as well, isn't it, if they don't believe in it, to want to work for the organization. So actually all this kind of internal, external employer brand stuff wraps up really nicely together.
Absolutely.
As well. I was thinking about this, you know, writing about it as well, you know, what brands come to mind for doing this? And some do absolutely come top of mind. Tom's Shoes, you know, they led with this. Others are doing the same, kind of giving back. Patagonia lead with this. And like some other organizations, talk very little about their products and services in their comms and social media, talking more about their purposes led as well. What other examples have you come across?
We've got one that's pretty close to home, really. So we work with Specsavers and have done for the last 20 years or so. And the organisation was actually set up by the founders, Dame Mary and Doug Perkins, back in the 80s. And they're still very much involved with the organisation today, as are the rest of their family, and it's going to remain that way, which I think is part of the reason that they have this really clear purpose and that it's retained that way. But when they set up, back in the 80s, their purpose was to change lives through better eyesight. Simple as that. And that's essentially what they've done. You know, they've opened stores nationwide now, across the UK and now globally as well. They've introduced audiology on the back of that. Then they recognize that there's people that actually can't make it into their stores. So 10 years ago, they introduced their domiciliary, so their home visit service. So for anyone that can't get into a store unaccompanied, they'll go out to them. And more recently, they've been championing to provide eye care for the homeless and the vulnerable people, because it's not that easy if you don't have a permanent address, for example, to get eye care through the NHS. So they're now funding clinics so that people can access these clinics and get access to free eye care. But that purpose message has remained true through that period of time, and is something that, you know, from our remit in terms of raising the profile of the local stores in their local and regional communities, is something that we filter down through our media relations and our social media content. So it's very easy for us to be able to do that. So I think, you know, they have a really strong, clear purpose, and I think it's working really well for them.
Cool. We are live. If you're watching this live, I should have said earlier, there is a chat. So if you have got any comments, feedback, any questions for myself, Sarah, or Sam, please do pop them in the chat. I can see that there is a fair number of people watching this live. I won't tell you both the number because I'll share that with you afterwards. But we have got a fair number of people watching live. We all work both in B2B and B2C, and you know, there's always conversations about one or the other, or, you know, what's the difference? I think the answer is that, you know, all of this topic, purpose-led, does apply to both. But do you see any differences between how B2Cs are doing this and B2B?
Absolutely. It's every bit as important for organisations that are serving other businesses. And it's really interesting because the process is the same. So the process of being clear within our own organisations, understanding what purpose means to us, because it's going to be very different in every business. For some, it's perhaps particularly rooted around sustainability. For others, it might be more about looking after the welfare of people, or changing outcomes, and often disrupting to try and do good in a different way. So it's every bit as important. The process on the pillars of purpose applies to every type of organisation. But I think what's really interesting is, so we get a chance to go out and talk with businesses in our communities here. We're based in Cheltenham, and we're able to go out and to network. And I was at a really lovely networking event recently with smaller businesses from the property and construction sector. So architects, contractors, construction project managers, but smaller businesses. And we were exploring this very topic of what and when and how should we be talking about our own, not necessarily just the purpose-led journey, but the kind of particularly around ESG, environmental, social and corporate governance. So that as being part of that conversation. And those of us that are in supply chains, particularly in those sectors, you know, actually increasingly we're getting asked about our policies, or you know, wanting to show how our values as an organisation might align with those that we're being contracted to. So, and there's so much change, and there's so much really important drivers in terms of the impacts within that sector that these businesses that I was meeting with, that they really care very deeply about the issues and about how they're trying to solve them in their own way, with their own teams and their own specialisms. But knowing kind of how to talk about it and when, you know, can feel like a little bit of a puzzle to unwrap sometimes. And I think that can make us feel a little bit nervous, or we might feel like, well, we're behind the curve, and is it okay then to start talking about it now? Or you know, there's lots of things that worry us about it, but actually the desire to have clarity and to engage in these conversations with our own internal audiences, as well as the people that we serve directly, so our direct customers, but those kind of supply chains is really strong. And I think everyone finds their own way to do it. You know, so in that conversation with these companies, we were talking about there's lots of brilliant frameworks out there that can help organizations to be very structured in their approach to moving towards sustainability, for example. So whether that's B Corp or Planet Mark or other accreditations, but finding the right one for you is important, and it doesn't necessarily be the same one for every organization. So it's kind of there's lots of good work, I think, happening in business communities to bring it to life.
Yeah, I'd almost forgotten about that. Yeah, when you start working with someone or you're pitching and it's all about the questionnaires that you get through, or the creds, or the values, and if I think about why I get out of bed in the morning, I get out of bed in the morning if my values are aligned with the people that I'm working with, because I want to work and do and engage. So
absolutely,
yeah, kind of supply chain. There's a whole nother topic there. Sam, when I was rereading the research, there's a brilliant quote in there around. It said, I had to write this down. If you don't communicate a purpose in an effective way, you might as well not have one.
Yeah.
Which kind of really was.
Yeah.
Yes, you're absolutely right. What's the point of doing all that work and doing the planning and the recruitment and getting the right people and all of that if you don't communicate it, which is what we do. So let's talk specifically about social media. Of course, it is just one channel, but it is hugely popular and real time and all of that. We work together a lot on social media content and comms. So what are your tips for effectively communicating purpose?
I think it comes back to what we've already probably touched on, really, about being authentic, being real, being honest, consistency, clarity, listening, listening to understand. Sometimes it's about listening into those communities that you want to tap into and feeling, or hearing what are their issues, the topics, the themes that are coming out of that. One of my tips, Luan, would be from you, actually. So I know that, for our clients, when we're planning their social media, we create a bit of a plan on a page, don't we, ahead of working with them, which identifies, exactly what key messages which align with their purpose that we want to communicate and what themes they fall into. And then in terms of consistency, we're making sure that we're sharing those messages on a regular basis. So I think having that kind of, systematic approach to it is really important, actually, and when we're trying to get across consistent messaging.
I could obviously completely agree, but I think it's something that the purpose part of it is sometimes easy to forget if you're planning content, because you're thinking about what are our products, what are our services, what are events that we at, and trying to almost like communicate the day-to-day stuff, and sometimes forget the core messages, that what sits behind it, and needing to let people know our values and our purpose and what we stand for and what initiatives we support as well. It's almost like sometimes that pillar of content can be forgotten, but is also, it's not easy, but it's almost like the easiest one to keep feeding and have ongoing content. And I saw a brilliant chart of this. I've used it in some training, of where you almost have like this level of always on content, and we call that hum, so it's humming in the background, and then smaller campaigns that are perhaps singing, and then bigger campaigns, maybe 1 or 2 a year, that are shouting. And I think you can have big campaigns around your purpose, but also it's got to be something that is in that always on messaging that people are hearing and coming into contact with.
Yeah, definitely. And I saw some interesting stats recently from Unilever, actually, that were looking at the question of whether content creators, how they feel about sharing messaging on sustainability, if that's part of their purpose. And actually it showed that there was a real nervousness, actually, about how to share content that isn't going to be accused of greenwashing, which then kind of brings us on to the kind of the green hushing concept of actually, how do we find the language for it and the right content to share that is evidence-based and that we can back up. And I think that's the way to do it, is to be absolutely sure and to be questioning of ourselves. So coming back to the pillars of purpose, really, Sam, and that need to be counsel to our clients, or if you're an in-house team, counsel to our senior execs, that actually the questioning of, are we really sure that we can back it up? And have we asked all the questions that we want to ask internally to understand where we're at with that before we share? Because as long as we can have clarity, have evidence, back it up, then it's really positive for us to be talking about what our organizations are doing, because we need to share this. We need to share it not just because it's good for our businesses to be talking about the positive things, but actually it's about how we're engaging in dialogue, how we're role modeling, how we're showing that it's not just for the big guys to be talking about this, it's how we can as smaller organizations engage in that process too. So I think, when we're thinking about the content that we're creating, that's quite an important point, I think, for us to have that clarity and to think about how we weave it in.
Yeah, this isn't a 20-minute conversation. What's our value? What's our purpose? Is it? This is a big topic that needs lots of people involved and socializing and having those conversations. And then I think if you can do it with authenticity, you wouldn't be fearful. You're fearful if you see it as being one of those, we need to talk about box ticking exercises. We have had a brilliant question, and Elijah sat on the river in Scotland, very jealous of that for a start, but has asked, do we have any tips on ensuring that those we reach are following the call to action in a comms campaign, e.g. if we're crowdfunding for an environmental project or sharing a particular post? How can we get people involved to do what we want them to do to support purpose content?
That's a great question. I guess, again, it comes back to clarity, does it, on what it is, what the calls to action are, what it is that we want people to engage with, and whether that's conversation or whether it's action. I think some of the things that, I don't know whether it's exactly the scenario Elijah's thinking of, but where there's tips and things that you can really take away. I love this content that I read where there's takeouts, so where there's things which you learn, and then you can think about and take back into your own organization or into your own daily lives, that kind of create that stream of action.
I think for me, what is important is when going back to those content pillars, is that there is a call to action, and that in our social media, one of my biggest social media content do's is when you're creating a post, you think about what do you want the people reading this to think, feel and do. And dare I say it, we're scrolling really quickly and working really quickly, so sometimes we have to tell them what we want them to do. And I remember talking on another event with the social media team at UN Women, and they really do this quite well, and they just put retweet if you agree, and that has got huge amounts of engagement, and people reading that tweet, now post, probably went, I agree with that, but actually telling people to retweet and push it out to their networks and show that support for their message as well. So I think it is, even though this may feel, like I said, that kind of underlying core activity, we can still ask people, what do you think? And have you, what initiatives do you support? Or how are you feeling about this? So don't miss the calls to action, even on this kind of content where you're not trying to drive to a website or buying a product or register for an event kind of activity. Anything else from your research that you think we should be aware of, Sam, or think about?
I suppose the only other thing I would mention is I think purpose brings real clarity as well when you're making decisions. So again, one of the people that I spoke to talked about it being a guiding light or the North Star. And I think particularly, we saw through COVID where organizations were having to make really difficult decisions. Actually, those that were purpose-led, although they were still tough decisions, they made those decisions a lot easier. And I think that, that then filters down throughout the rest of the organization when you're making whatever decisions you're making. If you've got a really clear purpose, it helps you stay true to that.
And I guess it's that thing, isn't it, of that's where the leadership is, where, I mean, almost every conversation comes back to leadership eventually, doesn't it? That kind of real sense of direction and commitment and living it through. And I loved the part of the model which kind of really touched on what we mean by that in terms of it being lived in every part of the organization. so that it's driving decisions in the operations, it's driving decisions in finance, it's driving decisions really through every part. And that's where that internal comms buy-in. And you know, we've got to have that lived first inside our organisations before we can meaningfully and legitimately really talk about it externally.
Yeah. Lots to think about. Merrick, hello. Lovely to see you. Can we provide some call to action tips? There is a section in the new book around call to action tips, so I will copy and screenshot and I will drop that through to you in a LinkedIn message afterwards. That's all in there about how to create more engaging content. Sarah and Sam, thank you for doing this with me. I hope it hasn't been too painful to speak on screen for half an hour, knowing that people are watching. Obviously, we speak on screen all the time. This isn't the first time we've had conversations around this topic. And we've recently recorded an episode for your new podcast. Tell us about the podcast.
Really exciting. So we're launching our first podcast called Target Talks. And that's going to be launching very soon, a little later this month. And we put this together because we've been having really great conversations like this with clients, with our colleagues and peers in the industry, and we thought we wanted to share it. So our first series of Target Talks is about purposeful communications. And as well as having you as a guest, Luan, to really explore again the importance of social media as one of our key channels for engaging with people and how we can use that with purposeful content. That we're also going to be talking with a chief creative officer from a photography and filming company, amazing creative guy. So we're going to be exploring, how does what we see match with what we say, and how do we do it visually, visual communications. We've got managing directors from organizations who are really deeply purpose-led and have been for some time, so they can kind of share how they've been on that journey, the J word, how they've really lived it from the inside out. So fantastic guests coming up there. We've got a corporate affairs specialist, really from a really large business. So we've got some lovely guests coming up. And we're really looking forward to sharing that. So it will be available on all the main podcast platforms. But if people want to follow us on our own social channels, Target PR, then they'll be able to see as soon as it goes live. But we're going to be live later on this month with those.
Amazing. I can't wait to hear the other episodes. And I think it's one of those, just hearing how other people are doing it and conversations like this, that is a great way to learn, as well as reading books and watching TED Talks as well. A huge thank you. Thank you to everyone who's watched this live. Thank you for everyone that's watching the recording later on. Much more to come on this topic. I will share links. I will share links to the Target socials as well. And have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.